you, Roxanne, who shepherds us through so many of these and always finds the right format for this moment.
I'm glad to have another shepherdess.
We have decided in this leadership team that it was time because the break was long, and it was time because the times that we live in are the times that we live in, to open the conversation, the wonderful conversations that are happening within the GVIA membership to the broader community of Bozeman. We have had wonderful years of deep sharing, personally getting to know each other, focusing on specific questions and practices in our various traditions. And we wanted to share the fruit of these conversations with all of you. Frankly, because we all need to learn more deeply what we are called to do here, how we are called to live. So this year we are starting big. We are starting with 3 panels focusing on different chapters of our life. Today we are focusing on the middle, and it's a very long middle. From the end of childhood to the beginning of what you would call very old age. It is just life as human beings, and in every faith tradition, we are asked to fill this middle part of our life, the years of strength, with different tasks, with different lessons, with different actions to build this world. When we in the GVIA membership had this first conversation in September, it was wonderful to go around the room and to learn just a little bit about what ordained and lay people had learned about the meanings of their lives. How important it was to be able to build a stable existence. And how important it equally was to help those who, for a number of reasons, are not able to take this first step into adulthood. How important it is to be and continue to be learners, spiritual learners, wisdom gatherers, so that we learn how to live wisely. And what a gift it can be to be able, maybe in the last third of this chapter, to give back, to offer guidance, to offer support, to offer resources beyond those 2 that I just listed, to younger people, to people who might struggle, to the broader community, and all the different needs that arise, and I don't need to tell you this, that arise really right now, every day. So, I am honored and grateful to welcome today Stake President.
Before we do that, I just want to make sure everybody knows the ladies' room and the men's room through that door, or around here and in that direction. And just a last word to say, welcome.
And thank you, Dick Deschamps, for hosting us here. It is a wonderful gift. So our first panelist is Stake President Dave Johnson, to your very right, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Bozeman. Dave Johnson and his wife, Lelena, are celebrating 34 years of marriage. They raised their 7 children here in Bozeman, and they now have 10 grandchildren. Who can top that? I thought so. Okay. He is currently serving as the president of the Bozeman, Montana stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In their faith tradition, stake president is an unpaid clergy assignment, usually lasting for 9 years. The Bozeman, Montana stake currently includes 9 congregations with just over 2,000 members. There are 5 congregations in Bozeman, as well as congregations in Livingston, Big Sky, Big Timber, and Gardner. Archdeacon Emeritus Roxanne Klingensmith is originally from Minnesota and has resided in Bozeman, Montana since 1981. With a background in education, theology, and lay ministry, she was ordained as a deacon in the Episcopal Church in 1999. Roxy has been deeply involved in community organizations, focusing on social justice issues. She founded Family Promise of the Gallatin Valley, a homeless family program, and the Fresh Start program designed to reduce recidivism in the county detention center, down from 40% to 14%. She served on various boards and council, a retired Archdeacon of the Episcopalian Diocese of Montana. She continues to serve at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Big Timber, Montana. She also is the pastoral care clergy for the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Bozeman. She lives here with her wife, Connie, an Episcopal priest, and has a daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren in Kaikoura, New Zealand. Wonderful. Okay. And last but not least, practice leader Steve Allison-Bunnell from the True Spring branch, an ordained member of the core community of the Plum Village Order of Interbeing, and the practice leader of the Joining River Saga at Bozeman Dharma Center. Steve Allison-Bunnell has practiced meditation and mindfulness in the Plum Village tradition, founded by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, for almost 2 decades. In 2021, he was ordained as a lay member of the Plum Village Order of Interbeing, making a commitment to support the Sangha and serve all beings on the path of non-harming. He grew up in a United Methodist congregation in Portland, Oregon, with a commitment to the social gospel, and belonged to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Missoula before adopting the path of engaged Buddhism. He was academically trained in biology and the history of science, and lives in Bozeman Cozen community with his family. And me, by the way. So thank you, Dave, Roxy, and Steve for joining us today. I did share those questions about a week ago to give you a chance to sit with them, think with them, and also prepare a little bit thinking about the people here in the space. We want you to leave with at least 1 or 2 inspiring sentences that might support you, or redirect you, or just give you pause, thinking a little bit about how we all live our lives here together. So we're beginning with something very broad. What are 2 central guiding values that guides one's life here on earth, according to your tradition? 2 guiding values. And I think in order to make it easier, we'll just always start to the right and then work our way there. Does that work for you, Dave?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I begin answering the question, I was at a training yesterday evening for volunteers who work at the Gallatin County Detention Center. And the Fresh Start program has been such an amazing success for those that are trying to make a change in their lives. Roxanne, your work there has been absolutely glorious, and I'm so grateful for you. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 2 elements of our faith tradition that I think answer this question are, first, that we believe that everyone is a child of God. And that means that we approach everyone, or should do our best to approach everyone, as if they have value, as if they have purpose, as if they have meaning, because we believe that to be true. And in that regard, the second thing I would offer is that we believe that our time here has meaning, it has value, it has purpose. I'm biased, but I often think how much better it would be if everyone treated everyone they come in contact with as if they have value and their lives have meaning.
Real pleasure to be with you today. I had a lot of fun sitting down and thinking, golly, what are the values that guide me? In my tradition, which is essentially Episcopal, I've been a lifelong Episcopalian, born an Episcopalian, and so I share these two central guiding values with you. Love and justice. Love inspired by Jesus' teachings is at the heart of my faith tradition. It encourages compassion, kindness, and empathy for others. And justice is about working toward fairness, equality, equity, and advocating for the marginalized. And these two values shape how one lives in my tradition and interacts with the world we live in. What I want to also say is I like the Great Commandment. And here's my version of it. Love God with everything you've got. Love yourself so you can love others. And so I find that that is a way of life which is not terribly wordy or involved, but it's difficult, it's challenging to live that out. But God's way, following God's way, leads to the fruits of the Spirit. And I think that's really important to me. Just mentioning love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so, as I sat and thought about this, I thought, not terribly complicated to talk about it, but it is a challenge to live it. And yet, in meeting the challenge, I find myself blessed.
Well, thank you, friends. It's a great honor to get to be here and help launch the series of meetings and gatherings. My teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, was very clear that Buddhist practice did not replace, but supports other spiritual worldviews and traditions. And so I'm really delighted to get to offer something that adds to, is part of the yes and instead of the yeah but. So in Buddhist imagery or mythology, even if you will, a bodhisattva is a being who reaches enlightenment and therefore could pass out of this world into permanent nirvana, but chooses not to. The bodhisattva stays with us to serve all beings and try to relieve the suffering of all beings. And that is a choice that that great being makes to sacrifice their own contentment, if you will, to be of service. And I think that, if anything, can boil down about 2,600 years worth of work on how to live in the world as a human being. So we as regular human beings and even lay people who are not living in a monastery aspire to that path of transformation. And we do so knowing that life is full of trade-offs and imperfections, and so we think of our path as a path of non-harming, because we know that harm takes many forms and it is sometimes impossible to avoid harm. I want to say that enlightenment is one of those terms that is most frequently misunderstood, probably right up there with karma, and it is far more active and grounded in the present moment than we might think. It is not, enlightenment is not just pure bliss or escape or even indifference to the world. It is the ability to let go of the instinctive reactivity and clinging and desire and regret that we all have as human beings and that we experience sometimes constantly and sometimes less often. But compassion for ourselves and others arises from being able to see the world as it is instead of only how we wish it were, how we want it to be, or how we wish it had been. And that is what can lead us to ending things like addictive behaviors, because we can see what they do to us or others, and that lets us let go of them rather than it being an act of willpower or somehow moral strength, even though moral strength is obviously a good thing too. Service goes beyond our sort of traditional notion of charity, helping those with material needs that we could fill the gaps in their lives. Service includes spiritual support to help others transform their dissatisfaction about the world in order for them to enjoy freedom and peace and contentment. And knowing how to serve comes from deep looking and understanding of ourselves and others so that we know what kind of help or service is truly beneficial. And I've had experience both within my family of needing to transform a relationship with a family member who we had a very difficult experience of one another. And in order to help them, I had to change how I saw them, and then how I thought of them, and how I could react and interact with them. And that's a very powerful part of my practice.
Thank you. Steve, I feel like you have already shifted gears and brought us into the second question. Because the second question was, what makes a life meaningful, or what makes a good life according to your tradition? And I think all of you have started to speak to this already. We all can live our lives as if they were dreams, without too much intention that time ticks by anyway. But each of our tradition asks us to give it meaning, to make our lives meaningful. It's really interesting to me that when you started to speak about the guiding values, you already said, we're here making an active decision, or at least some of us make an active decision to be here to serve. And I'm wondering, could you answer two more questions, picking up on what you just said, instead of the broader second question? One is, what is the weight of the world here as opposed to a different world in your faith tradition? And what is the kind of service, because I heard all three of you say we're here also to interact, to treat each other, because all of us have value and meaning. What is the task that your tradition sets us? What is the way to serve in this world? And what's the meaning of that service in this world as opposed to another world?
Yeah, because you already spoke about it.
I think that the path to service in our understanding really does stem from this notion of seeing the world as it is. That if we want someone else to be something, or we don't want them to be something, or we wish we weren't something, or we wish we had something, that sends us in all kinds of directions that may or may not be beneficial, and it may be harmful to us, it may be harmful to others. So that deep looking and clarity of understanding, coupled with compassion, with connection. I think I heard that from our other panelists, that in Buddhism there's a concept of non-self, or no separate self, or emptiness, and that all sounds rather esoteric. And again, Thich Nhat Hanh changed that term to interbeing, the idea that everything, everyone, everything in the universe is really connected in some way or another. Our bodies are made up of materials that came from the food we ate and the air we breathe and the water we drink, and the food came from the soil and the sun, and on and on and on and on. It just goes out. There's no actual sense of where I leave off and where you begin, except for, yes, I am sitting here, I have a body, I have agency in that body. But that paradox of how distinct I am from you or other beings is what leads me to act with compassion, that sense of connection.
When Sonja wrote me and asked me to be on the panel, she asked me, what is the most challenging thing that you're facing? And I said, it is how to be, I'm in this world, but I'm not of it, in my faith tradition. In other words, if I look at the world around me and see what is going on, right now, it's pretty, whatever you want to say. It's disappointing. It's hurtful. It's not what I would say is of God. And the challenge for me is to not get caught up in that stuff, but to live in a different way, the way that I believe God is calling me to live. And so the challenge I face every day is, yeah, I'm here, I'm in it, but am I of it? And do I really want to be of it? Because I just spoke about our values of love and justice. And I'm very pleased also to be in the Unitarian Universalist family here, because talk about walking the talk, whoop, they do it. So really, quite frankly, I think that is terribly challenging. And I think for me, a meaningful and good life is to live out compassion and love and service and community. And it involves some things that I need to do to stay of this world. Some study spiritually, also partaking in the sacraments of our church, and striving for justice and peace in the world. Stanley Hauerhaus wrote a fantastic book years ago called The Resident Alien. And what he said was, it's easy, very easy for us to get caught up in the culture, in what is going on, and forget the gospel. And that is where I think we are called to sit and to be, because hopefully by doing that, I'm leading a life that, as I said earlier, is blessed, but also consistent with what I'm challenged to do and to be. And I think it is a big challenge for all of us in whatever faith tradition we are. I don't know of any faith tradition that isn't involved in the golden rule, loving each other and others. And so I think that for all of us, we are faced with, how do we do this? How do we be in this world and also have a meaning of a way of living that is free and good?
Well, after this is just leaving Roxanne all day, I should just go out there. Gosh, there's so many different ways to approach this. Let me start by sharing that as in the role that I serve and have served in different roles in the past, I find that there's some truth in when we're feeling like life is particularly hard, we're feeling broken down or frustrated or lonely or worried, all of those real feelings and emotions, that one of the most therapeutic things we can do for ourselves is to find a way to help someone else. I know that that's been true in my life. And as I find myself in what I hope is the middle and not the very end, it's okay if it is, I just don't know if I'm ready, is that hasn't always looked the same. When I was a little more able-bodied, often service involved picking up heavy things and moving heavy things and planting things and dragging things and lifting things. That's not necessarily in my wheelhouse anymore. One of my first assignments in Bozeman, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is I was assigned to be a seminary teacher. In our faith tradition, high school students have the opportunity, at least the way that we offer it here in Bozeman, is to attend a religious class for about 50 minutes a day, every day that there's school. And when I taught, it was at 6 o'clock in the morning. And we did that for all 4 years. And at that time, I was on the young end of the seminary teachers, and the other teachers that I served with were probably much younger than I am now, but I did not think of them as young at the time. And I remember I said to them one morning as we met for a prayer before we went to teach our classes, that I couldn't wait until my children were older and had graduated high school, and life would be so much freer and easier, because I was at a point in my life where every Friday night I was driving to Missoula or Billings or Great Falls for a sporting event or a speech and debate or whatever my kids were in. And the other 3 teachers who at the time were, at that time they were women, they laughed at me. They laughed hard and out loud, and they said, "Oh, Dave, you're so delightfully stupid." They said, "You're complaining about driving to Great Falls, but at some point, your kids are going to be in their 20s or 30s, and they're going to be married, and they're going to have children. And instead of worrying about one child at a time, you're going to worry about their families and their spouses. And they're not all going to live as close as Great Falls." And that's true. So service for me now, in what I hope is the middle of my existence, has changed. Now I'm hopefully can take advantage of a little bit more experience and offer advice and counsel and comfort. And I'm starting to learn that maybe the best service that I can offer someone else, if you'll allow me to take this from A.A. Milne, author of the Winnie the Pooh books, is sometimes the best service we can offer is just sitting next to someone else and listening. And there's a comedy show that was on a few years ago, and a character who thought he was very charming with women and was not. Had a wonderful piece of advice, and if you'll allow me to interject it. He was talking to someone who was having trouble with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend wouldn't listen to the advice he wanted to give her to solve all of her problems. And he said, "Your problem is you not only don't understand women, you don't understand people. When you're in a relationship, you have one responsibility, and it is not to solve the other person's problems. Your responsibility is to say," and I quote, "Wow, baby, that sucks." And nothing else. As we're reaching a point in our lives where perhaps maybe our service isn't as physical as it once was, what we have to offer is maybe even more valuable, and that's just to be there. Whereas Winnie the Pooh might say, just to be.
Thank you so much. I forgot to mention there will be time for questions also, but I want to share one more question with 3 panelists before I will hand over the microphone to all of you, who might have your own questions at this point of listening. And that is deviating a little from the script because you've given so many answers already. all three of you spoke of service. And I'm wondering, what in your tradition helps you to discern what is the priority of the moment, of the day? Because I think all of us share this feeling there's a never-ending list of things we should do. And yet, we are, even though we're all connected, but I think a lot of us it's the feeling of being sometimes very small in front of a never-ending list. What helps you to discern what is the right thing to do now? And I'll start with you this time.
So you're fair.
That's a wonderful question, Sonja. In the moment. I think we have to be in the moment. Sometimes we see something that needs to be done and we jump. We go to it. We forget maybe we don't have the capacity or resource. So I think probably one of the things that's important for me is to get somewhat of an understanding of what might be going on with either the person or the situation that I've been asked to be involved in. One of my sources is the Spirit. And I've had an absolutely amazing life sitting in the Spirit. And to really feel comfortable, confident, right about responding in the moment, I might ask for a little guidance, a little show, lead me to a place. And I've been stunned by the stuff that rolls out of my mouth. Stunned. Let me share a little example of that with you. One afternoon, in the largest men's pod at the Gallatin County Detention Center, I was visiting with a group of men and they left, but one stayed, and I said, TJ, would you like just a little conversation for a little while? And he said, yeah, I would. And this particular person was a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. And he served as a medic. And somewhere in that conversation, I don't even know what precipitated, but I said to him, how many people out of 10 do you think that you were responsible for saving? And he said, 4. And I said, have you ever thought about the fact that you were the last person to love them in the last moments of their lives? And this particular person had attempted suicide. He hung his head and said, no, and was silent for quite a long time. What led me to say that was the right thing in that moment, I truly believe, was the Spirit working in my life. And so in my ministry of 26 years, I feel like I have been led to these places with a great deal of wisdom. And I'm now, of course, at a place in my life where I really trust this. It can happen. I'm doing pastoral care, which is a main assignment I have with the Unitarians. I just am amazed at what comes out of my mouth when I am serving these precious people. And I rest in that. I rest in the fact that something is going to come. Something is going to come and give me what I need to say. And I totally agree with you. The ministry of presence is probably the most important ministry we could do. just being with somebody. But I'm grateful for the guidance that I am really at the end of my middle life.
I don't know.
I mean, I just turned 85. Okay. So, but I think what has really come to pass is that wisdom and living it out and making mistakes has led me to a place where it seems to be a little easier or a little more well-defined as to how I might discern how I am in this situation. So.
I was really thinking Steve should go next. So, all 7 of my children are adults. 6 of them are married. We've had 10 grandchildren born. 7 are still living. My wife's mother passed away in March of 2020. My mother passed away in the middle of April of 2020. We're now at the point where we're somewhere between grandchildren and aging parents. And service can look different. Seeing my friend Frank Hanisek, who I've known for a long time. I don't know if you know this about Frank, but he was one of the most dedicated individuals to the Boy Scouts of America I've ever met in my entire life. And one of the things that we teach in the Boy Scouts is principles of leaving the world better than you found it, whether that's your campsite or the person that you're next to. And as I consider what that means, at the beginning of October, my father moved into our home. And a friend of mine gave me probably, for me, one of the most important books I've read other than Scripture, which is called Being Mortal. And I'm a slow reader, Roxanne, as you know. But
Have you finished it yet?
no,
Oh,
I'll keep reading. It's only been 2 months. It's like 120 pages. And I'm trying to understand, how do I serve my father, who both my sister and I were adopted, so this is an individual who has given me, and through his military service and life and companionship with my mother, has just given so much. How am I supposed to serve him now? I'm trying to learn what that's going to look like. I know that it won't be the same for everyone. I'm trying to find the balance between keeping him healthy and safe and enjoying his life. And that's new territory for me. But if I can help him feel and help him know what we know about him, which is that he has left the world a better place than he found it, then maybe I will have done for him a little bit of the service that he did for me.
So Roxanne spoke of hearing the Spirit, and I think the thing that comes to mind in our practice is, how do you make room to hear the voice of the Spirit? And when we are busy and running around, both physically and mentally, and always have that to-do list going, and always looking to check something off, or going on to the next thing, or even in a conversation, waiting for our turn to say what we're gonna say.
I never do.
Me neither. We have not made room for that voice of understanding, of compassion, of patience for ourselves and for others. And so, mindfulness is something that's kind of gotten a little bit over promoted, maybe, Because mindfulness is not about simply waiting, being able to put up with something you don't like. It's about stopping. Stopping physically, mentally, emotionally, in order to make space for that other voice that will come forth. And when we talk about coming home to ourselves, that's what we mean. We mean accessing that essential ability to know what is harmful and what is beneficial. Buddhism, in my study and practice, doesn't have a lot of complex moral calculus. There's a very strong sense that we all have a basic, strong, true knowledge of what is harmful and beneficial to ourselves and others. And it's these other things that we get caught up in. Well, I want something for the future. I wish something in the past hadn't happened. That keeps us from being able to ground ourselves in that basic experience of harm and benefit. And it's it's in our bodies. It's not just an intellectual checklist or requirement. It's how we experience ourselves in the world. And so that stopping, that spaciousness is something that we spend most of our practice on. And that can sound like a practice of privilege. That when I am comfortable and safe, I can pause and look and see and make space and be content with the world. But in fact, it can work in almost any setting. And Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, lived his early life in war-torn Vietnam and was forced to leave because he was not trusted by any of the sides. He wasn't willing to express a loyalty, and his only loyalty was to the people who needed help. But he practiced through that nonetheless. And the prison ministry that's been described is extremely powerful. And there are members of Montana Sonjas who have an active prison ministry in Deer Lodge, and the inmates who are incarcerated there have transformed their lives in spite of being in a place that, of course, they do not want to be, and that they are there because of terrible things. And so it is possible to practice and find enoughness in the present moment, almost anything. But that is a very ultimately mundane experience. And this is the other thing I want to say about enlightenment, is it's not angel choirs and shafts of light from the sky and, okay, I'm done now, I got all this. It's this moment when I'm driving down 19th and there's traffic, but I look up and there's the bridges and there's the expanse of the sky, and I am there, I am here, I'm looking outward with my whole view instead of in here, I'm late, this guy's a terrible driver. And those just the present moment is made up of a string of those mundane moments. So that's the secret sauce.
Thank you. I'm going to make our life real simple right now. And every person who wants to ask a question or share a comment and observation, you are allowed to ask one question and share one comment or observation. And if you have 3 questions, then I will come to you 3 times. But I think then we will not get lost. Who would love the microphone? 1 and 2, please.
Hi, my name is Sandra. think the question I have that's so much related to the world we're in right now is I have trouble understanding why there are so many people who say they belong to a particular spiritual tradition, but their actions and words are anything but, and why so many people think that's okay. Do you have any insights?
I'll try. It is what it is. And that isn't terribly helpful, but it is. And really, quite frankly, one of the things that I hear about, I'm not going to be a part of your faith tradition, or I'm not going to church. They're all a bunch of hypocrites. And my response is, there's always room for one more. Practicing, I don't know. I have the same question, Sandra, that you have. Why? And I will tell you that I'm getting kind of away from saying I'm a Christian and saying, you know, the guy that I follow, that Jesus guy, well, I'm a follower of Jesus. Because it's getting embarrassing to say, I'm a Christian. Come on. And so I think it breaks my heart. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating. And yet I think, well, okay, I wear a collar, I'm ordained, and I love where I am, and I'm going to walk the talk. I'm going to act instead of speak. And hopefully somebody will meet that particular wonderful place in me by doing that. And I really appreciate what you're saying, and I'm joining your club.
Someone who's a leader in our faith said recently, as a reminder, that our chapels are not houses of the perfect. They're hospitals for the hurting. And I think that that's true. I know I could be better. I imagine that everybody I go to church with could be better. But I believe that being there is a good step in the right direction. Maybe on some level, I think what you're saying is 100% true. I believe in the doctrine of repentance, which means that all of God's children have the opportunity to do better tomorrow than they did today. Whether it's because I made a mistake or just didn't do something as good as I could have. But I think it's frustrating. My particular assignment as a state president, I am often meeting with people who've made decisions that my wife likes to call it falling out of the boat. You know, if we're in a boat and we're hopefully going down the path that God would want us to travel on, we need to stay in the boat. Not to let the waves push us to and fro, but to actively try to get where we need to go. But sometimes in our lives, because of circumstances or situations, we fall out. And one of my biggest frustrations is when we jump out. And I have friends who I've looked up to and admired as mentors in my faith for over 30 years who have jumped out of the boat. And some of them jumped out of the boat because they thought it was the best way to save other people who had fallen out of the boat, particularly their children. They felt that if they jumped out of the boat, they could at least be with their children. But now their children are lost, and they're lost. You can't help anybody back into the boat if you're not in the boat yourself.
like to think that our mindfulness practice is, even though we're supposed to be calming ourselves and feeling more stable in the world, that doesn't mean that we are validating our confirmation bias. In other words, we are constantly being invited to ask, is it true? Is my story, not just somebody else, but is my story about the world true? And when we do that over and over and over again, we start to peel the layers of that onion and see that, well, maybe not, or maybe so, here and there. And it seems to me that in our current social and cultural and political and possibly religious milieu, we are more, many people are more drawn to following the story that sounds good and that helps them feel better about what's going on without asking the question, is it true? And chasing after a thing that in Buddhism we call this dispersion. You're chasing after something that makes you, that soothes you, but is not actually solving the problem. And so, money, sex, fame, power are all the classic things, but some kind of religious self-justification about why I deserve what I deserve and why this other person shouldn't have what I have, etc., is part of that story that is buttressing our own sense of stability, but it's not truly stable.
Thank you for this question.
You're not going to have to walk very far.
Okay, I'll stay.
My question is for you. What are your perspectives on the two guiding faiths, Jewish perspective, and any of the other comments that were made in your other questions?
Let me just ask back so I understand. The two guiding faiths.
Your original question, the two guiding principles.
Oh, the two guiding principles. Okay. I'm not on this panel today, so I never thought about this at all. You know, it's interesting because in Judaism, they're not two guiding principles. They're different paths. And listening to almost everything all of you said, three of them showed up. One is the path of learning. And for those of you who identify as eternal students, you know who I'm talking about, right? It is people who learn to see the world differently by reading, by studying, by diving deep. We also heard so much about service. There are people to whom comes this so easily. The being with other people, the connecting with other people. There are many people to whom this is the greatest challenge in their life. It really is, for different reasons. But if someone is able to connect and able to serve, then this is one of the paths we have to living a good and meaningful life. And the other path I have heard today, and I honestly, I was even a little surprised but very moved, it is what we call the path of the mystic. And that is the leaning into, the listening, the waiting for answers, not necessarily in the faces of everyone surrounding us, not in a book, but from inside or outside or up, however you define this. So, you know, we shy, I think culturally we shy away from big principles and structures. We have great respect for the individual path that lead to what we call a meaningful life. But I do not want to make this about me. Any other questions for the panelists?
won't be a question, but I would like to offer a very short prayer. I'm of the Baha'i faith, and we have a prayer at noon that we call the noonday prayer. It's kind of a reminder of kind of a sum of what we've been speaking of. And it goes, I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my poverty and to thy wealth. There is no other God but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting.
Thank you. And I was just reminded by Valerie that this might have been our closing prayer. Dear Foxy and Steve, thank you so much for coming. Thank you, all of you, for the ways you listened. Sometimes I heard someone laugh, I heard someone say, I saw a bunch of people taking notes. This time was a gift you made this community from your time and your wisdom. Thank you. And I hope we will see all of you again at our two next panels. The next one is going to be about the end of life, and then the last one at the end of spring is going to be dedicated to the topic of how to pass on wisdom, teachings, and practices to the next generation. Thank you all for being here.